Chapter 3, Communities and Populations. Section 1, Community Interactions. Introduction. Biomes as different as deserts and wetlands share something very important. All biomes have populations of interacting species. Species also interact in the same basic ways in all biomes. All biomes have some species that prey on others for food. The focus of study of species interactions is the community. What is a community? A community is the biotic part of an ecosystem. It consists of all the populations of all the species in the same area. It also includes their interactions. Species interactions in communities are important factors in natural selection. They help shape the evolution of the interacting species. There are three major types of community interactions: predation, competition, and symbiosis. First, let's talk about predation. Predation is a relationship in which members of one species, the predator, consume members of another species, the prey. The example that is provided for you on the slide is a lion and a zebra. Lions are carnivorous animals that are considered the predators in this example, while the zebras are herbivores. Therefore, the lion is going to eat and consume the zebra, and this is an example of predation. The zebra is the prey. Predation and population. A predator-prey relationship tends to keep the populations of both species in balance. As the prey population increases, there is more food for predators. So after a slight lag, the predator population increases as well. As the number of predators increases, more prey are captured. As a result, the prey population starts to decrease. As the prey population decreases, the predator population begins to decrease as well. The limiting factor limits the growth or development of an organism population or process. So what this slide is basically saying is, if we start off with a high amount of zebras, that's going to be a lot of food for the lions to eat. So therefore, the lions are going to have enough to eat, which would then increase their population until eventually the zebra population would decrease. And because there's now not enough food for the lion population would decrease as well, and it will keep that same balance. Keystone species. Some predator species are known as keystone species. A keystone species is one that plays an especially important role in its community. Major changes in the numbers of a keystone species affect the populations of many other species in the community. So the example that is provided for you on this slide talks about sea stars. They are a keystone species in coral reef communities because sea stars prey on mussels and sea urchins, which have no other natural predator. So if there are no sea stars present, then the mussel and the sea urchin population are going to increase very rapidly. So the sea stars helps maintain that balance. With that said, now if we took out the sea stars, and like we just talked about, the mussels and the sea urchins now have an increased population, that's going to in turn affect other species living in that area. So now all of a sudden, the mussels and the sea urchins are now consuming other organisms, or animals that consume those types of species are now not feeding on the other types of species that they would be eating, causing other populations to increase. So you can see that whole effect. I also would like to point out that if we were to remove the keystone species from a biome or an ecosystem or a community, whichever one you want to talk about, that community would then be destroyed because that is a major species within the ecosystem or the environment. Adaptations to predation. Both predators and prey have adaptations to predation that evolve through natural selection. Predator adaptations help them to capture prey. Prey adaptations help them to avoid predators. A common adaptation in both predator and prey is camouflage. Camouflage in prey helps them hide from predators. Camouflage in predators helps them sneak up on prey. So let's talk about what the definition of adaptation means. An adaptation is an evolutionary trait that will allow an organism to better survive in its environment. So for example, if we remove birds' wings, inhibiting them from being able to fly away from their predators, you would probably see a low bird population because they are unable to fly and get away. So the wings would be the adaptation for the birds. The example that is talked about on the slide, the camouflage, you'll notice that in some tropical rainforest biomes, that there's going to be all different types of snakes that have different patterns and shapes and symbols on their snake skin, which will allow them to better blend in with their environment so they're not eaten. The same with the lions and the tigers. If you notice, they're from the grassland biome. They're going to have a brown coat, allowing them to blend in with the brown grasses when they're chasing their prey. Competition. Competition is a relationship between organisms that strive for the same resources in the same place. The resources might be food, water, or space. And there are two different types of competition: interspecific competition and interspecific competition. First, let's talk about intraspecific competition. This occurs between members of the same species. For example, two male birds of the same species might compete for mates in the same area. This type of competition is a basic factor in natural selection. It leads to the evolution of better adaptations within a species. So obviously, if two birds are trying to compete for a mate, the one that has the better adaptation, either the more colorful wings or the singing of the songs or the bird dance, which is a thing, then that trait, an adaptation, will be passed down through evolution because they're more likely to reproduce. Interspecific competition. This occurs between members of different species. So for example, predators of different species might compete for the same prey. An example for this could be let's say a shark and I'm trying to think of another, I can't think of a carnivore whale off the top of my head. I'm drawing a blank. Let's say a lion and a tiger. Okay, they are very similar, but they are two different types of species. We'll stick with the zebra situation. Both are hungry, both need to eat. There's one zebra. The lion is going to try and kill the zebra, and same with the tiger. So they're going to be battling for the same amount of food if there's limited within that area. Interspecific competition and extinction. Interspecific competition often leads to extinction. The species that is less well adapted may get fewer of the resources that both species need. So let's say the lion was able to get that zebra and the lion is always getting the zebra. Well, the tiger species is eventually going to fade out or become extinct because they are not able to eat and reproduce and keep their species going. Interspecific competition and specialization. Instead of extinction, interspecific competition may lead to greater specialization. Specialization occurs when competing species evolve different adaptations. For example, they may evolve an adaptation that will allow them to use different food sources. So an example of this would be birds' beaks. If you ever get a chance to look at a variety of different species of birds, you'll notice that the shape of their beak, the size of their beak, how it's formed allows it to eat specific types of foods. Now they're all birds, but having the ability to scoop up fish from the ocean or to peck away at wood or to crack open seeds, those are all different specializations that each bird will have in order to allow it to better survive in its environment. Symbiotic relationships. Symbiosis is a close relationship between two species in which at least one species benefits. For the other species, the relationship may be positive, negative, or neutral. There are three basic types of symbiosis, and those are mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. Mutualism. Mutualism is a symbiotic relationship in which both species benefit. An example of mutualism involves goby fish and shrimp. The nearly blind shrimp and the fish spend most of their time together. The shrimp maintains a burrow in the sand in which both the fish and the shrimp live. When a predator comes near, the fish will touch the shrimp with its tail as a warning. Then both fish and the shrimp will retreat to the burrow until the predator is gone. From their relationship, the shrimp gets a warning of approaching danger, and the fish gets a safe retreat and a place to lay its eggs. This is an example of mutualism. Both organisms are benefiting while living together. Commensalism. Commensalism is a symbiotic relationship in which one species benefits while the other species is not affected. One species typically uses the other for a purpose other than food. For example, mites attach themselves to larger flying insects to get a free ride. Hermit crabs will use the shells of dead snails for homes. Another common example of commensalism would be the barnacle and the whale. Barnacles will attach themselves onto the whale, allowing them to catch debris from the ocean while the whale is swimming throughout. The barnacles are not harming the whale, but it's also not benefiting the whale. The whale is just being the taxi driver around the ocean. So commensalism is when one organism benefits while the other is not being harmed or affected by it. Parasitism. Parasitism is a symbiotic relationship in which one species, the parasite, benefits while the other species, the host, is harmed. Many species of animals are parasites, at least during some stage of their life. Most species are hosts to one or more parasites. Some parasites live on the surface of their hosts, others live inside their hosts. They may enter the host through a break in the skin or in food or water. Parasitism example. Roundworms are parasites of mammals, including humans, cats, and dogs. The worms will produce huge numbers of eggs, which are passed in the host feces to the environment. Other individuals may be infected by swallowing the eggs in contaminated food or water. Some parasites kill their host, but most do not, which is easy to see why. Because if a parasite kills the host, then the parasite is also likely to die. Instead, parasites will usually cause minor damage to their host. Another common example of parasitism would be a tick on a dog. A tick is sucking the blood out of the dog while injecting Lyme disease. That Lyme disease is going to harm the dog. Therefore, this is an example of parasitism. The tick is benefiting while the dog is being harmed. Ecological succession. Communities are not usually static. The numbers and types of species that live in them generally change through time. This is called ecological succession. Important cases of succession are primary and secondary succession. Primary succession occurs in an area that has never before been colonized. Generally, the area is nothing but bare rock. This type of environment may come about when lava flows from a volcano and hardens into rock, a glacier retreats and leaves behind bare rock, a landslide uncovers an area of bare rock. Pioneer species. Pioneer species is just the first species to colonize a disturbed area. And these species are going to pave the way for the development of a new environment within that area. So first, it may be bacteria, and then eventually small grasses and plant life will grow. Organic matter will be there, and then eventually animals will later move into the area. Lastly, secondary succession. Secondary succession occurs in a formerly inhabited area that was disturbed. The disturbance could be a fire, flood, or human action such as farming. This type of succession is faster because the soil is already in place. In this case, the pioneer species are plants such as grasses, birch trees, and fireweed. Organic matter from the pioneer species improves the soil, and this will allow other plants to move into the area, as well as animals and things like that. Finally, climax communities. A climax community, many early ecologists thought that a community always goes through the same series of stages during succession. This is not always true. Sometimes it will change and develop into something different than if it was before. So that is that example. It may have been something at one point and then totally converted to another based on what pioneer species inhabited it first. Thank you for your time and listening to this PowerPoint presentation. I hope you learned a little bit more about community interactions.